Hey my friends, welcome, so happy to have you here. Today I'm sharing with you 10 of my favorite farmhouse DIYs. Let's get started. For this project, we're going to be using this wood round from the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to go ahead and give it a coat of Waverly's Ivory paint front and back. And once it's dry, I'm going to tape off the top third of the wood round, and I mixed together two more paints from Waverly. It is hazelnut and truffle. I was looking for a little bit of a lighter color, but didn't quite get there, but I think this color is so pretty, so I didn't really mind. I'm just going to give it 2 coats of this color and let that dry, and then we'll move on to the next step. Next, I taped off the bottom third of the wood round because I want to apply the Mod Podge only to that bottom third, because we're going to be decoupaging this gorgeous napkin from Hobby Lobby. And y'all, I picked up a huge package of these about 2 years ago and still working my way through them. And I've already removed the extra layers that was on the bottom of the napkin. You want to make sure you do that so the top part will adhere to your surface. And I'm using the tape to keep it even and straight as possible across there because I want a very clean, crisp line. And I'm just going to use an iron on low heat to reactivate that Mod Podge and help the napkin adhere to the wood round. I love this method. It gives you such a beautiful finish almost every single time. Then I'll just use my nail file to remove that excess napkin. We're going to add a strip of this Dollar Tree lace right across the top of the wood round where the napkin and the paint meet, just to camouflage that a bit. And I'm just going to use just a little bit of hot glue to attach it on the back side and then just stretch it across the top. I'll add a little bit of glue along the way just to keep it laying down flat. And as you can see, I did go ahead and cover the back of the wood round with some craft paper from the Dollar Tree. I've got some brown paint on the back, and I just like the back sides of my projects to have a nice clean finish, so that's just a little something I like to do. And then we're going to add another piece of ribbon right on top of the lace. It's this faux leather ribbon that I picked up during Valentine's Day from Walmart. Y'all, it's so pretty. I just haven't had a chance to use it. It's got little brass hearts all the way across, and I thought this was just so pretty, a mixture of leopard print, lace, and faux leather and brass hearts. To me, it's just such a pretty combination. We're going to be adding the word blessed to the front of the wood round, and I'm using a combination of paint that I had left over from another project. I believe it's ink and truffle from Waverly, and you can see it's quite dark even with applying it with the baby wipe. And I laid it on top of the wood round when it was dry, and it was just too much brown, too much blah. So I decided to use pumpkin from Waverly, and I'm using a baby wipe again. I put a couple of layers on there, and y'all, it's such a beautiful burnt orange color. I just love it. And I'm just using a combination of E6000 and hot glue to apply it to the front of the sign. Y'all, I can't tell you how much I love this burnt orange color. I think it was just the right decision to do, to go over it with that pumpkin. We're going to make a really quick and easy bow. I've already cut the strips for the loops and for the tails, and I'm just going to be gluing the ends of the loops together and just kind of tapping them together. Be careful you don't burn your fingers. And the ribbon that I'm going to be using came from the Dollar Tree, Walmart, and the leopard print came from Amazon, but I end up not using that. It just didn't seem to fit well with the rest of the bow. When making this type of bow, I like to use my Easy Bow Maker. It's a little trick I like to use because I have trouble holding my ribbon, and if you do also, this is perfect for this type of bow. And you can see I've already cut my tails, and I'm going to pinch it in the center and put it down between the two pieces of wood. Then I'm going to take the matching loop, pinch it in the center as well. I've already folded it to find my center, and just crisscross it. And then I'm just going to do that with each of the other pieces of ribbon. I'm going to pinch it in the center, put the tail down, go in the same direction as the loop, and then I'll pinch the matching loop of that tail and put it in the opposite direction. You can see what I'm doing here on screen. And I'll repeat that all the way up. Now I do make a little bit of a change here. I didn't put the leopard print in, but I also left out one of the golden tan pieces of ribbon. I just thought it was too much, and I decided to add in more of the mesh ribbon. I thought it was so pretty, and I really think that was the better choice. I just cut a couple of more tails, cut another loop, just pinched it in the center. I didn't hot glue this because it's too thin and it would seep through and you'd be able to see it. Just put it right between the two pieces of wood, and then I also switched out the piece of twine for a zip tie, and I'm just going to pull that across and then just cinch it. But I'm not going to cinch it completely. I'm going to lift it up and then adjust my ribbon and get it exactly where I want it. I love to fiddle with my bows, so I'm just going to play with it until I get the pieces of ribbon exactly like I want it. Then I'll cinch it really tightly and just snip off that excess piece of zip tie. And then I'll just play with the bow and just fluff, fluff, fluff until I get what I'm looking for. We're going to decoupage the front and back side of this heart, and this little heart came from the Dollar Tree, and the honey very sweetly drilled a hole right at the top of the heart for me. And I'm just repeating the same process I did with the napkin earlier, just using heat to attach the napkin front and back, and then I'll just hit it with my nail file and remove that excess napkin. To reopen the hole in the heart, I'm just using this large needle, just kind of sticking it in there, wiggling it around. It's a little too big, so I had to kind of push it through, but that's okay. It opened it up really well for the twine that we're going to use to suspend the heart from the bow. And I did cut my twine a little too short, but that's okay. We'll make that work in a moment. But I'm just going to take the two ends together because I'm going to be adding some beads, and these are just beads I had left over from other projects. I like to do that. I like to paint a little extra for little small projects like this. You have them ready to go. Anyway, I'm going to tie a knot just above the heart because I don't want that first bead to sit right down on top of the heart. And once I get that bead on there, I'm going to put just a little dab of hot glue on that knot. And whenever you pull that bead down over the knot, the glue goes inside, and so does the knot, and it holds the bead in place and it covers up that glue. And this is where I'm thinking about, ooh, the twine's too short, but we do make it work. I'm only able to go around about 1.5 times, but that's okay. I didn't get the dangle that I really wanted with the heart, really be able to see both sides of that pretty napkin, but I still think it turns out really pretty. But you do want to just use just a tiny bit of hot glue. You don't want a globby mess, and just wrap it around there and just kind of hold it in place till it sets up. All that's left to do is add some hot glue and attach your bow, and once the glue's had time to set up, just give your bow a really good fluffing and just pull it and fluff it all out. And y'all, I love this. It is so pretty. I would love for my heart to dangle down just a little bit more, but that's okay. I am happy with how it is. I'd like to know what y'all think about it. What do you think about the colors and the leopard print napkin? Thank you so much for stopping by. I hope you'll take a moment and hit that subscribe button if you're enjoying my video. And while you're at it, go ahead and give me a thumbs up and tell me where you're watching from. If you're returning, y'all know how much I love you and appreciate you. And thank you for always returning to support my channel. For this project, we're going to be using one of these long signs from the Dollar Tree. And you can see I'd removed the heart on the back at some point in time. We're just going to flip this over. And I'm going to give it 2 coats of Waverly's chalk paint in the color Truffle. Once the paint was dry, I'm going to go in with Rust-Oleum's Linen White and just an old chippy brush from the Dollar Tree. And I had intended to just do a very light dry brushing to break up some of that really dark brown. And y'all know me, I always get heavy-handed, and in this instance I think it was a really good thing because I think it really works better with this project. We're going to add 3 beads to each end of the sign, and I have 2 rounds and 1 square, and these are beads I had left over from other projects. I find painting beads so tedious, so whenever I do have to paint them, I just always paint extra and keep them on hand. And because they were looking so new and didn't fit with the project, I went in with a nail file and just scuffed them up just a little bit, and then I'm going in with a little bit of antiquing wax just to further distress them. We're going to loop some twine around each end of the sign as well, and I'm just using a little bit of hot glue to attach it, and then I'll just wrap it around 3, maybe 4 times, and then before I attach the other end, we'll go ahead and add our beads. I've wrapped some tape around the end of the twine just to make it a little bit easier to go through the beads. And then once I get them positioned exactly where I want them, I will tie a knot right at the bottom of that white bead. And then I'm also going to add just a little bit of hot glue to keep that knot in place and to keep the beads from sliding around. Just give the hot glue a moment to set up and flip the sign over, and then just tack down that other end with a little more hot glue, snip it off, and then I'll just repeat the same process on the other end of the sign. We're going to be adding the letters HME to the front of the sign, and I'm using my favorite color of all time, celery from Waverly Chalk Paint, and I ended up giving these letters 3 coats. And once they've dried, we're going to attach them to the front of the sign. Now these letters came from Michael's, I believe. I've had them so long, I don't know if you could see that they were kind of beat up, but anyway, we sanded them down a little bit. And for the O, we're going to be using this beautiful white sunflower. And this I picked up about 2 or 3 years ago from Walmart. So I don't know if you can find them again, but I love them. I think they're so pretty. And I'm just going to use a combination of E6000 and hot glue, mostly E6000, just a teeny bit of hot glue to attach these to the sign. I don't know if you can see it on the sign, but I have put a bracket at the upper left corner and the bottom right corner of where I'm going to place my letters, just to help make sure they're going to be even and straight, because I'm notorious for getting things crooked. And y'all, this glue is so thick. I'm using a popsicle stick here to help spread it out. This is not my favorite E6000. My favorite is Gorilla Gel Glue, but I have this big tube on hand, so I need to use it up. So just a little trick there for you. But anyway, back to the brackets. I love these brackets. My honey came up with this idea because, like I said, I'm notorious for getting things crooked. Once I finish this project, I do put a sheet of wax paper over it, and I set several cans of soup and canned goods on top of them overnight, just to make sure it's going to keep everything pressed down and in place. I'm going to use Velcro instead of glue to attach the sunflower, and I'm just taking a little piece of Velcro. I've cut it off from one of those long strips you get at the Dollar Tree, just cutting it into 2 tiny little strips, and I'm going to put one on the top and on the bottom. Now this sign is meant to be used all through the year, and you can switch out the sunflower for whatever the season may be. Now I had intended to create a pumpkin to show you, but y'all, I was rushing to complete this and get everything filmed before we left for vacation. As you're watching this, I'm in Mississippi visiting family for an extended vacation, so please forgive me for that, but I will hopefully be able to show you at a later time what it will look like with different things in the place of the sunflower throughout the different seasons. Y'all, I am just in love with this piece. It really was easy to make, and it is just so neutral and just a very versatile piece. Let's create a fun and easy DIY using this cutting board from Walmart's Dollar Spot. And y'all, I really like this. I paid $5 for it. We're just going to flip it over. We're going to paint the back side with 2 coats of Waverly chalk paint in white. And then once it's dry, I'm going to go in with my sanding block and then just distress it some around the edges. We're going to add this rooster to our cutting board, and this came from Walmart. Y'all, I don't remember how much I paid for it. I've had it for forever. It is back in their crafting section, so I think it was maybe $1.25, $1.50, something like that. Anyway, I'm just going to paint most of the rooster in the color truffle, but its wing and what is that? Its tail feathers, something like that. We're going to paint those white because we're going to be decoupaging those. I'm coming in with a layer of Mod Podge for both the tail feathers and the wing. Once that's dry, we're going to add our napkin. This napkin came from Hobby Lobby. I picked a package of them up for a couple of years ago back in their party section. I think they still have some, might not be exactly like it, but similar. But anyway, I've cut down a piece to the size that I need, and then I'm just using the heat method, which reactivates that Mod Podge and causes the napkin to adhere to your surface. This is one of my all-time favorite ways to decoupage. I absolutely love it. It gives it such a perfect finish. You watch my videos, y'all know this. I absolutely love it. Then I'm just going to use a nail file, and I'm going to tell you this was a little bit tedious. And usually I tell you to sand down or away from your project, but because of the location of where I'm trying to sand away the excess napkin, you actually had to kind of go back and forth or sideways, almost like you're filing your nail. But this is very sped up, so I just did it very, very gently and just very slowly, and just went back and forth between the larger nail file and a smaller one. And again, it's kind of tedious, but it was so worth it. I think my rooster turns out absolutely beautiful. We're just going to make a quick, easy little bow for the top of the cutting board. And both of the ribbon came from the Dollar Tree. And this that I'm working with now, y'all, the fallout is real. You can see a little bit of the black there on the table, but it's a pretty ribbon, but just be aware that the black that falls out, it's very real and it gets all over everything. I don't want the rooster to lay flat against the cutting board, so I'm using one of these little cubes from the Dollar Tree, and I'm using a combination of Gorilla Gel Glue and hot glue. And as you can see, my little squares on the back of the rooster, just to know where I want to attach it, kind of hold it in place till it sets up. Then I'll use the same combination to attach it to the cutting board. Now that I've added the rooster, I'm going to go ahead and add the bow, and just using a little bit of hot glue, going to pop it onto the top of the cutting board. And I just kept feeling like it was missing something. I couldn't figure out what it was, so I just let it set overnight. The next day, and I'm like, it needs some greenery, so I'm using this greenery. It came from Michael's, and I got it back in the spring when they had their 70% off sale that I picked up some items, and I'm just snipping off some little pieces and just popping them in there. Now, I didn't cut them down. I will go back later off camera and snip them down because they were just way too long and just looked kind of weird sticking out there. And as you can see, I popped in 3 little beads, and y'all, I always make extra beads when I'm painting beads for a project. And perfect example, I thought it needed just a little bit of something else, put them on some twine, and then just used my little tool and hot glued it right up under the edge of the bow, and I think it was just the perfect addition. But y'all got to tell me what you think. And what do you think about the leopard print on my rooster's tail feathers and his wing? I love it. It's different, it's unique, and I am really enjoying this. Now, this house has been in my stash for quite a while, and it's seen a little bit better days, and the fabric is already lifting up at the ends, as you can see. Now, I did hit it with the blow dryer to loosen that glue and make it a little bit easier to finish pulling off. The plaque, on the other hand, I had to use some elbow grease and my spatula to kind of pry and push, and it finally came off. It damaged it a little bit on the back side, but that's okay. I was still able to salvage it and use it later in the project. Now, my honey is a safety guy, and he's always telling me when I do stuff like this to put on a glove. And y'all, I'm so glad I did, because you'll see right here, this thing came off and went right into the side of my hand. Thank you, Jesus, I was wearing the glove, so no harm done. It did mess up the back of the plaque, but that's okay. And I also broke the roof as I was prying that off, but you know what? We didn't need it anyway. Just giving everything a good sand down, front and back, and I'm going to paint the back side and use that side of this little house, and I will cover up all that ugliness on the back side with some craft paper. And I've got to where I start trying to do that with all of my projects, just to give them a little bit of a nicer and clean finish on the back side. And I am using Rust-Oleum's linen white to paint the house. I'm giving it 2 coats. I'm using antiquing wax from Waverly for the outside of the house. Now, I started out with the baby wipe, which is my preferred way to apply antiquing wax, but I just wasn't happy with the results I was getting, so I switched over to the paintbrush and was much happier with that. I'm just adding a layer of Mod Podge. We're going to let that dry because we're going to be using the iron-on method to apply our tissue. If you're not familiar with the iron-on method, you're using heat to reactivate that layer of Mod Podge that you put down first and let dry. And I've put a sheet of parchment paper over the top, and my iron is on low heat since I'm using this thin tissue. And I like to start in the center of my project. There's no right or wrong way. You do it however best suits you. And I just smooth out from the center. That way, for me, it gets out any air bubbles or anything that might be up under my tissue or napkin, scrapbook paper, whatever you're decoupaging. And this gives such a perfect finish 99.9% of the time. And it is so easy. I absolutely love it. I'm just going around with my sanding block. I'm just going to remove any of the excess tissue. Just remember, you always want to sand away from your project. That way you don't risk tearing your napkin, tissue, whatever you might be using. Remember the plaque we removed from the front of the house? Well, I gave it 2 coats of Rust-Oleum's linen white, let it dry, and we're going to be adding a rub-on transfer, and this came from the Dollar Tree. And I'm just going to line it up as best I can on the plaque, and then we're just going to use my little tool that came with some transfers that I ordered off of Amazon. And y'all, I love this, but really a popsicle stick, credit card, whatever you might have will work for this just as well. I want to say a quick thank you for all the well wishes and prayers after my surgery. I'm doing much better on the mend. So happy to be back crafting. If you're new here, hi, I'm Gwen. A great big welcome to you. Welcome to all my new subscribers, and a great big thank you to all of my returning subscribers. Y'all mean the world to me. Now we get to add our embellishments, and y'all know me, more is more, right? But seriously, I love this chiffon ribbon. It is so pretty. It's called Sage Green, I believe. I got it during the spring from Amazon, and I'll link it down below. And I'm just hot gluing it on. It's very, very sheer and thin, so if you do have this, just be careful that you don't burn your fingers when applying the hot glue. And then over the top of that, I'm going to add this lace, and I've had this for a couple of years, and it came from Amazon as well, I believe. I'm using this needle to help get the twine through the lace. Now, it's a little bit large for this project. It's the only one I had on hand at the time, but it gets the job done, and it makes it a lot easier. And it's just making the twine look like it's a stitch in the lace, and you'll see what I mean in just a moment. I think it just looks so pretty and just gives it that extra little bump. I just love the mixture of this twine and lace together. I don't know why, but I'm just loving it. And then on top of the chiffon ribbon, that is just so pretty to me. And I snipped off the excess of the lace and then I hot glued it directly on top of the chiffon ribbon using just a little bit of hot glue. Less is more here. Using more twine, I'm just going to go ahead and make a quick little finger bow to pop right in the center of our ribbon. Now because we will be adding a key, I snipped off both of the tails. I thought it was just too much. And I'm using one of those tails and just threading it through the top of the key, and then I'll snip that down just to make sure it's going to be a good fit. And then we'll add just a dab of hot glue to attach both the key and the bow. I thought the plaque looked a little bit plain, so I'm just using a brown marker and I'm just going all the way around and just giving it some faux stitches. Now this is strictly optional, you could just leave it as is, but like I said, I thought it looked a little plain, so we're just gonna fancy it up a little bit. All that's left to do is add some hot glue and just pop it into place. And y'all, this was so easy and so inexpensive, literally, because I had everything. If you want to count the house, it was $1.25 to make this, and it is just absolutely beautiful and adorable. And I really feel that it is something that you can use year-round. I'm going to keep it on my hutch, and I absolutely love the saying, family is everything, period. Y'all, for this DIY, we're going to be using this charger plate from Hobby Lobby, and I'm going to start by giving it 2 coats of this acrylic paint from Apple Barrel, and the color of the paint is nutmeg. And guys, I'm so sorry about my voice. It's kind of coming and going. I've been sick with allergies and sinuses, so please forgive me. Once the paint dries, we're going to be applying a Crackle medium from Folk Art directly on top. Now, you do want to make sure with this Crackle medium that both of your paints, your top and bottom, is acrylic paint. It doesn't work very well with chalk paint. Again, once it's dry, I'm going to apply the Crackle medium. I'm just pouring it straight onto the charger plate, and I'm just going to spread it out in a smooth, even layer with my sponge applicator. Now, once it was dry, it did have a little bit of bubbles. Once you apply the top coat, you really can't see it. I think the reason for the bubbles is I may have shaken up the medium. I try not to do that because it can cause bubbles whenever it dries, so just be aware of that. Now I let this set overnight. It says to let it dry at least for an hour, but I let it set overnight because I had other projects to work on. For the top coat, I'm using the color Snow White from Apple Barrel, and it is a matte paint. And when I'm using this particular Crackle medium, I try not to go over my layers of paint once, maybe twice at the most, because it will diminish the amount of crackles that you get. Now, obviously, I do not have enough paint on my brush or on my plate, so in some areas I did have to go back and forth over it just to make sure I had coverage. But you'll see in just a moment once it dries, it looks so pretty, and I had some beautiful crackles. We're going to be decoupaging this beautiful napkin onto the bottom of our charger plate, and I found this at the Dollar Tree, and we're only going to be using this bottom half of the napkin. And to remove the excess napkin around the flowers, I'm using my water pen to dampen it. I prefer this method, but you can certainly fussy cut if that's what you prefer. I just like this. It looks more natural and organic, and to me it just blends in better with your surface. Now this particular napkin is only 2-ply, some are 3, but you do want to make sure you remove all of your layers before you start to decoupage, or only those bottom layers will stick to your project. I'm very happy with how the crackles turned out, even though I went over some areas a couple of times. I think they came out really well. And y'all see my baby Gizmo. She's there inspecting and just supervising mommy to see what I'm doing. She loves to watch me craft. That's why I have the chair there most of the time whenever I'm crafting. But on this particular day, she wasn't having it. She wanted on the table and was not happy that I wouldn't let her up there. But anyway, I'm lining up my napkin as best I can. And then I'm just going to put down a thin layer of Mod Podge. And then I'm just going to work in little sections. I'm trying to prevent wrinkling. Now, I do get a little bit of wrinkling, especially when you do it this way. It's usually you do. I don't mind so much because of the crackled background. You can barely tell it. But I'm just using a combination of my fingers, which I don't recommend because it can stick to your napkin, and plastic wrap. I love to use plastic wrap, and it just smooths out your napkin, and it will help squeegee out any excess Mod Podge or air bubbles that might be under your napkin. And then I'll just use my brush to go back over the edges of the napkin with some more Mod Podge just to make sure everything is sealed in. Off camera, I went ahead and cut 2 of these little seed starter pots in half. Mine came from the Dollar Tree, but I'm sure you can find them anywhere this time of the year. And we're just going to jazz them up with a little bit of lace and ribbon, just using hot glue to attach one end of the lace, and then I'll wrap it around to the other side and then use a little more hot glue to attach it, and then I'll just do the exact same thing with the purple polka dot ribbon. Isn't that purple polka dot ribbon so cute? I absolutely love it. It's been in my stash forever, finally getting around to using it. As if these pots weren't already so stinking cute, we're going to add a simple little bow right to the center of each one. Once the napkin was dry, I'm just going to use my nail file and remove that excess napkin, and then we're going to attach the flower pots to the front of the plate. And I've just put this ruler on here to try and make sure I keep my flower pot straight, and I'm using hot glue for video purposes. Of course, you can use whatever glue you prefer. To keep the flowers from falling to the bottom of the pot and just kind of flopping over, I'm adding in some of this moss, and then we're just going to add in these cute little pink and yellow flowers. These are so sweet. The pink came from Hobby Lobby, I believe. I've really had these for a long time, at least 2 years or more. And the little yellow ones I picked up about a month or 2 ago whenever I went to Michael's, and they are just so pretty and just so delicate. But of course, you can use whatever colors or type of flowers that you have on hand. Same goes for the ribbon and the napkin. I'm using this because, number one, I love the colors and how this looks together, but I've also been sick, so I haven't been able to get out a whole lot lately. So I'm just crafting from my stash for this video, and I believe everything that I'm using I have already had on hand. The newest thing that I'm using is these little yellow flowers, and then I picked up the flowers that's coming up in the next DIY. I picked those up last month at Walmart. I just kept feeling like the project was missing something, and as I often like to do when I feel that way, I'll set the project aside, come back the next day, and that's what I did with this one. Decided I wanted to make a little messy bow and add it to the top. It's just ribbon I had on hand from Dollar Tree, Walmart, and Amazon, and just popping it at the very top of the plate at a little cute angle, and to cover up the twine that's holding everything together, I'm just going to add this sweet little daisy in. Now, honestly, I would have rather have had a little yellow flower to complement the yellow flowers in the pot, just didn't have it on hand. But I think this came out so absolutely adorable, and it's just such a pretty little rustic piece for spring, but you could make this to fit any season of the year. Just switch up the napkin and the colors and the type of flowers that you're using. I did add a hanger to the back of the plate, so this can be a shelf sitter or you can hang it up on your wall, whatever you prefer. We're going to take this new and unused cutting board from Walmart and turn it into an old, weathered, beautiful vintage piece. And we're going to do that by using Waverly's Antiquing Wax and some white paint from Rust-Oleum. I'm going to start with applying the wax front and back of the cutting board, and I'm going to give it 2 applications. Now I want this to be very dark, so I'm going to be using this sponge applicator. If you do not want your cutting board to be this dark, you can always use a baby wipe or some type of dampened cloth, and it'll give you a much lighter application. We're going to make the cutting board look even more aged and weathered, and how I'm going to do that, I'm using this paintbrush. It's seen better days. The bristles are sticking out at odd angles. The texture of it's kind of rough, and that's great because I'm going to dry brush the paint over the cutting board, and I want it to make it appear that the color is wearing away and that it's got scratches on it, and those bristles that are sticking out at odd angles, that's perfect for it. It's just lightly brushing this white paint, and it's from Rust-Oleum. It's linen white, and I'm just gradually building it up around the edges, again making it look like the color of the cutting board is just wearing away. I want to keep this piece pretty simple and neutral, but I do want to add a little bit of detail to the cutting board. So I picked up this stencil at the same time I found the cutting board at Walmart, and I'm going to add some Mod Podge over the top of the stencil before I add the paint to help prevent bleeding. Once the Mod Podge is dry, I'll come back in with my paint, and the color paint I'm using is Celery from Waverly Chalk Paint, and I'm just very gently dabbing and pouncing over the stencil. And I'm not using a lot of paint at all. If I want to darken it up, I'll just add a little bit more paint. I'm again trying to prevent any bleeding with this stencil. Now I don't know if you can see it because it's such a small stencil. There are some little tiny flowers on there, and I originally painted them white, and then when I lifted up the stencil, I just didn't care for it. It was blending in with the white paint that I used to distress the board. So I lined the stencil back up, and then came back in with some lavender sachet from Apple Barrel and just went over that, and I think it was a much better choice. I just repeated the exact same process on the top corner of the cutting board, and once it was dry, I came back in with my finger sander and just lightly sanded over each of the painted areas just to help it blend in a little better with the cutting board. We're going to make a little small swag to add to the cutting board, and I'm just using a variety of greenery I had on hand. This green eucalyptus, that is from Amazon. The little leafy green bits is from the Dollar Tree, and the little white branch, that's from Aunt Michael's. And y'all, I pulled the tag off, so I'm not real sure what the name of that is. Sorry about that. But I'm just grouping them together, and once I get them placed just like I want, I'll kind of pinch them together and hold them in place, and then I'll add a little bit of hot glue right at the top of the greenery, just above the leaves, and then I'm just going to start wrapping this rope around the stems, and I'm going to wrap it all the way to the very tip of the stems, and then I'll snip off that rope and then add a little more hot glue and just tap it into place. Then I'll add a little more hot glue right to the center of the handle and pop the swag into place, and it's finished, y'all. I think this is just such a beautiful rustic farmhouse piece, but of course if rustic and distress is not your taste, you could absolutely skip that for this piece and just add the stencils and the greenery, perhaps even a bow. I even went back and forth if I should add a bow, because y'all know I love my bows, but I think it is just gorgeous in its simplicity. But I would love to know what your thoughts are. We're going to be using this wood round from the Dollar Tree, and we'll be giving it 2 coats of Rust-Oleum's Linen White. And when that's dry, we'll go in and give it a coat of Mod Podge, and then we'll let that dry. We're going to be decoupaging, and we're using tissue that came from the Dollar Tree, and it also came in that package that we used in the previous DIY, and I love this. Isn't it pretty? The camera is not doing it justice. It's like a grayish green, and I love the stripes, and I'm just lining it up as best I can there. I want my stripes to be straight and even, and I'm just going to repeat the same process as I did with the house. I'm putting parchment paper over the tissue, iron on low heat, and I really, when I'm using a large surface like this to decoupage, I really like to start in the center and work my way out, just to make sure I'm hitting every bit of that surface and reactivating the Mod Podge, which will help my tissue to adhere to the wood round. And it also helps to get out any air pockets or anything like that that might be under your tissue. Then I'll just hit it with my sanding block and just remove the excess tissue. We're going to be adding the word home to our wood round, and I'm going to give it 1 coat of ink from Waverly Chalk Paint. Once it's dry, I'm just going to use some hot glue and pop it onto the sign. Now this came from Hobby Lobby and was originally $2.99, and I believe I got it for 40% off. I've had it for a while, and I thought it would just be a perfect addition to my wood round. To make our hanger, I'm using a piece of black rope, and to give it a little extra security, I've cut a strip of this brown crafting paper, and then I'll just pop that over the end of the rope just for, like I said, some extra security, and it will also help to cover up your work. To help camouflage the 2 holes where the original hanger was, I'm using these 2 push pins from the Dollar Tree, and I snipped off the little pointy pin section of it, just using some hot glue, and we're just going to put them right over those holes. For the bow, we're going to be using this ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I cut 3 strips at different lengths, hot gluing the ends together, and I'm just going to stack them on top of each other and just make a very simple bow. Now, I'm notorious for not getting the sides of my bow even, so I'd like to just bend it in the center, make sure everything's even before I wrap my pipe cleaner around it. To help hide the pipe cleaner, I just folded over a piece of the ribbon, hot glued it together, and then I'll just wrap it around that center and use a little more hot glue to keep it in place. I decided I wanted to have a tail with my bow, so I just took another strip of this ribbon, cut it down to size, dovetailed the ends, and I'm just pinching it in the center and taking one of those little tiny pieces of pipe cleaner and just twisting it around to keep everything pinched together. I'll clip off the excess of the pipe cleaner and use a little bit of hot glue and just hot glue the two pieces together. Now, if you struggle with making bows, this is one of the easiest, most simple bows you can make. I thought I would change it up just a bit and add the bow to the bottom of my wood round instead of the top. I always put them at the top. Tell me what you guys think. Would you prefer it at the top or at the bottom? I want to add in just a little bit of greenery around the bow, and y'all, I love this greenery. I picked it up at Michael's back in the spring, and they were having a crazy sale on all their greenery. I believe it was 70% off, and I picked up several bunches of this. I think I have one more left. I really hope I do. But anyway, I thought this was just the perfect addition to this sign. It's just very soft and neutral, not overly bright and in your face. And I plan to keep this sign year round. Tell me, would you keep this up year round? What are your thoughts about that? Y'all, let's create a very neutral farmhouse sign, and it is so easy to do this. I believe this sign came from Pop Shelf. I've had it in my stash for quite a while, so I really don't remember, but I think it was Pop Shelf. But anyway, we're going to be using it. It's already distressed. I love that. So it just makes things move along so much faster. And this stencil came from Hobby Lobby, and I'm just lining it up on there as best I can, trying to get it centered, and then I'm going to tape it down, and then we'll move on to the next step. I'm using the color ink from Waverly Chalk Paint in one of these little sponge daubers. And y'all, I've had a hard time finding these at my local Dollar Tree, so I found them on Amazon. They're actually a much better price. I'll link them down below if you like. But anyway, I'm just going straight up and down, trying not to drag it across the stencil. And I forgot to add Mod Podge to help with the bleeding. And also you can see I'm using my finger, and then I will switch in a second to tweezers. For whatever reason, the stencil just kept popping up and down and just shifting. I don't know what was going on. Anyway, I did have a little bit of bleeding and looks a little wobbly in a couple of places, but well, sometimes it is what it is. I just kind of went over it, as you'll see in a minute, with my sanding block, and it just kind of blended it in, or at least I hope it did anyway. But I'm going to take a little tiny brush. It's actually a makeup brush, and just go over and fill in where the little gaps were left by the stencil. And that's strictly optional. You don't have to do that, but I just think it gives it a much better look. I'm just very lightly sanding over the word and the paint. I feel that the sign is already distressed enough, so I didn't really want to distress that even more. Just wiped off any residue, and then I'm just going to attach some ribbon on one end with some hot glue. And I think this black and white ribbon came from Walmart. Y'all, everything that I've used for this project I had on hand already. I'm just shopping my stash. Isn't that the best way to do a project? You already have everything on hand. But anyway, I'm just popping it on with some hot glue, and then on top of that, I'll add this lace from the Dollar Tree. I've taped together the ends of 3 pieces of twine just to make it go through these little small beads a lot easier. And these are beads left over from other projects. And once I have them in place, I'm going to tie a knot at the very bottom of the brown bead just to hold the beads in place. And once I have that knot, pretty tight, I'm going to pull on it gently where it will kind of pop back inside that bottom bead, and it will just help hold everything in place. And for a little added security, I'm just going to add just a tiny bit, like a drop of super glue. And again, that will hold everything in place and keep the beads from sliding down. I'm going to fray the ends of the twine just a little bit with this little pointy tool from the Dollar Tree. And because it's a little too long, I'm going to trim that up as even as I can and then use just a little bit of hot glue and attach it to the back of the sign. For a little extra security and to cover everything up, I've added a little piece of ribbon over the back of the twine, and the beads kept swinging around, and so I'm adding a little drop of hot glue to the very top of the sign and just kind of tapping it into place. You don't want to smash it down, because if you do, you're going to smear that hot glue everywhere and you'll be able to see it. And then add just a tiny bit more right behind that white bead, and it just holds everything in place. I think this turned out just so darling, but y'all gonna have to tell me what your thoughts are. For this DIY, we're going to be using this calendar from the Dollar Tree and this cutting board that I had left over from fall. We're going to start by removing everything from the front of the cutting board, and I'm just going to use my little scraper and stick it up under this round part and just work it all the way around. You don't have to push too hard, just a little bit of pressure, because it's just stuck there with some glue, and just work all the way around. Just use a little caution that it doesn't slip and cut your hand. You can wear a glove if you prefer. Now just continue to work it all the way around until this top round part just pops right off. And as you can see, it did tear the brown paper just a little bit, but that's okay. We're going to peel all that off, and this just peels off very, very easily. I gave it a good sand down, but it still had some texture and felt a little rough, so I just flipped it over to the back side and gave it a good wipe down and gave it 2 coats of Waverly chalk paint in the color Snow White. I chose the picture of this cow from the calendar, and I think she's so adorable and just so sweet. And I guess it's a she. We're going to go with the she. But anyway, I'm just doing as detailed or fussy cut as possible. I want to get all the details of her ears and across the top of her head. And we're only going to be using the cow from this picture. Y'all, I need your help. I'm considering changing the day and time that I upload my videos. I'm just not sure that 7 p.m. on Sundays is working anymore. So if you don't mind, leave me a comment down below. Let me know what day of the week you watch videos, around about what time it is, and then I'm going to take a look at everything and then make a decision. It won't be immediate. I'll let everybody know if I'm going to keep it the same or make some changes. But again, sure would appreciate your help. Thank you so much. I want to mimic the background of the calendar page, so I'm going to use a ruler and just a plain old pencil, draw in some faux shiplap lines, and once I get those drawn in, I'll use the tip of my finger and just lightly run it over those lines and around the edges of the cutting board, just to smudge it out and give it a bit of a distressed look and make it look even more like that calendar page. This step is optional, but the back of this cutting board's a little bit rough, and I want it to have a nice, clean, finished appearance. And especially if you're going to give it away or sell it, or it may be seen from the back side, you do want to cover it. And I'm just using some of this vinyl from the Dollar Tree. So I'm just putting down the layer of Mod Podge. You don't want to put too much, because these calendar pages do have a tendency to wrinkle. Now, spoiler alert, I did have a little bit of wrinkling, but I'll show you in a minute how I fix that. I'm just going to use a piece of plastic wrap to smooth everything out, squeegeeing out any air pockets or bubbles or excess Mod Podge that might be under there, and then I'll just repeat the exact same process on the other side. Put a piece of plastic wrap down, and then I used my brayer on top to just make sure all the edges were sealed in. And y'all, right in the center towards the bottom was still this bubble that I could not get out. So I just put down a piece of parchment paper and used my heat press and just gently went over it, and it just smoothed it right out. Then I just went around the edges with my nail file and removed that excess paper. To me, you can't really have a farmhouse piece if you don't have some twine somewhere. So we're just going to add some twine to the handle of the cutting board. I'm just going to use a little bit of hot glue to attach the twine to the back of the cutting board, and then just wrap it around the handle. Now this could actually be a two-sided piece if you wanted to do so. I might come back at a later time. I tried to place the twine and the hot glue as carefully as I could to make sure it could be covered up by a bow or greenery or something if I decide to come back and make this two-sided. We're going to keep this bow very, very simple to go along with the rest of the project. I'm just going to fold over my ribbon like I'm making an awareness ribbon, pinch it in the center, and then just tie it off with some twine. And then once you get it tied off, I double knot mine to make sure it's not going to come undone. Snip off your ends and then just hot glue it to the handle. This project is very monochromatic, so we're going to add in just a tiny bit of color with some of this delicate little greenery. I think this came from Hobby Lobby. I'm recycling it from another project, so not 100% sure on that. And then to finish it off, we're going to pop this sweet little button right in the center, and we're finished, y'all. This is just such an adorable, easy little project to make. And if your kitchen is in the farmhouse style, it would just be a great addition to pop this sweet little cow in your kitchen. The details on this plate are so pretty. I just absolutely love them. It would be a shame to cover it up with paint, right? Well, guess what? That's what we're going to do. But don't worry, we're going to bring them back. But first we're going to give it 2 coats of this acrylic paint from Apple Barrel in the color Snow White. Now before we move on to the next step, you do want to make sure your paint is completely dry. Now it was the end of the day for me, so I just let it set overnight. You can hit it with a blow dryer, set it in front of a fan, just as long as it's completely dry. Now for this next step, you want to use a very fine grit sandpaper, nothing too harsh, because we're just gently rubbing it over the raised areas of the flowers. We're wanting to gently just bring those edges out and just define them and not go gung-ho and remove all the paint. As you can see, it's taking shape here on the screen. And you will see though shortly, I did not follow my own advice and I got a little gung-ho on the inside of the plate and rubbed a little too hard, and the corners of the sandpaper on my finger sander scraped along the edge. Now I'm going to cover that up and camouflage it with florals here shortly. But if you're not going to use florals or some other means to camouflage it, you can definitely go back in, repaint it, let it dry, and then just gently sand over it. I've already cut down my floral foam and I'm just going to hot glue it to the side of the plate. And y'all, I like to use a variety of greenery for my projects like this. To me, it just makes it look so high-end and elegant. And when I'm inserting it, I like to bend it just a little bit and make it curve along the side of the plate. And then I'm going to do the exact same thing for the bottom. And then I'm just going to start layering in the different greenery. Now I'm using greenery that came from the Dollar Tree, Walmart, and I actually had an old spring garland that had seen better days, and I've just been clipping it down and using it in projects. And that's the way I like to save money and be able to create all of my projects. I don't have to go out and buy something every single time you're going to make a project. I try not to hot glue my greenery and things like that in if I don't have to, because I like to recycle and reuse. Now you will see in just a bit my large flower, I do have to hot glue that in because it just will not stay. we'll get to that in just a moment. These last pieces of greenery that I'm adding in, these are the ones that came from that garland, and they're still very pretty. It's just the garland in general didn't look so great. And y'all, I like to try and balance out my projects. I am still learning, but I like what I do on one side. I like to try and do it on the other. To me, it just makes your project look more pleasing to the eye, but of course you can always do what makes you happy. Y'all, isn't this flower absolutely gorgeous? I love the bright, vibrant colors. I found this at Walmart. I got a big bush of these flowers a couple of months ago. I was in about 3 weeks ago and they still had some, at least at my local Walmart, and they weren't very expensive at all. As you can see, the foam is too thin, so I did have to clip down the flower even more, and that's when I went ahead and added the hot glue just to make sure it's going to stay in place. And the other flowers that you see there on the table, I got those as well when I was at Walmart. And those were only, I can't remember because it's been a couple of months, it was either 97 cents a bush or $1.47, which is still not bad. And they're very nice quality. And these are just so pretty. And I just gonna pop them in on either side of the larger flower. And I do go back later and add a little hot glue just to make sure everything is staying in place. I'm adding in this beautiful white lavender, at least I believe it is. Y'all, I threw away the tag and now I can't remember exactly, so if it's not, please tell me down below. I'd appreciate it. I'm just popping it in, and y'all, it is so pretty. I wish you could see it in person. This is some of the florals I picked up a while back from Michael's for 70% off. That's when I like to stock up on my florals, when it's so deeply discounted. And one of the little tricks I like to use, I like to add in my more expensive florals in with less expensive florals, and you can create such beautiful arrangements on such a small budget and make it look so high-end. And these little tiny ranunculus, these came from Walmart as well, and I thought they were just so sweet and just the perfect finishing touch for this arrangement. This hello sign came from the Dollar Tree, and I gave it one coat of ink from Waverly chalk paint, and after it dried, I'm just going to use a combination of super glue and hot glue to attach it. I am so very happy with how this turned out. I'm just loving it. It looks so, to me, high-end and elegant. And again, this is another piece that's just so versatile. You could create it for fall, for Christmas. Just switch out your florals and your word and any time of the year. And you can find charger plates anywhere. These are just ones I happen to have on hand because I am a collector. And as a crafter, I think I'm turning into a hoarder. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video today. I truly appreciate you. And if you're still here with me to the end and you're not subscribed, you must have liked something, so why not go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Seriously, it would mean the world to me, and I would appreciate it so much. Thank you again, and I will see you soon.